There has been a lot of talk this week, a ton of talk, too much talk to avoid about George Pickens, the comments from Art Rooney about George Pickens, and why it means that Art Rooney basically said George Pickens stinks and he's gone. We can't do it anymore. I saw article after article. Every morning I wake up, I have the same routine. I jump on, I do a bunch of work at 6 o'clock. By 6:30, 6:45, I'm scrolling through the internet looking at Steelers news because did I miss anything? Is there anything out there that I need to get my hands on? Is there anything out there that we need to talk about? That's where you start your day. Every day for like 2 or 3 days now, I'm seeing George Pickens, Art Rooney, George Pickens, Art Rooney. Well, let's read the news. Let's read the quote from Art Rooney that has sparked conversation about whether or not the Pittsburgh Steelers have any intentions of bringing back George Pickens this offseason. Quote, George is a very talented player who has room to grow, and we'd like to see him grow, and hopefully he realizes the potential that he has, but there's definitely room for growth. Okay. Later he said this. Every team seems to have one or two guys in that room that are, and I'm not going to lie to you, you saw it, you heard the audio, laughter, immediate laughter from every single person in that room because we all knew exactly what he was saying here. You have to manage them correctly. I still think George has enough talent that we've got to try to work and see if we can get him to reach fulfill the talent that he really has. Who knows if we can get there? We'll see. But when you have guys that are as talented as some of the guys you are probably thinking of, you try to work with them and have them help you be successful. Everybody has somehow spun that into Art Rooney, and I'm not saying the fans, I'm saying the media, I am calling out my own here, has spun that into Art Rooney doesn't want George Pickens around. He's not going to get a second contract with the Steelers. His future is done. The Steelers have given up on him. I took that as the Steelers have been through AB. They've been through Deontay Johnson. They've been through Chase Claypool. They're now on to George Pickens. And they fully understand George Pickens is an issue. George Pickens causes issues. George Pickens is a distraction. George Pickens has maturity issues. All things that Mike Tomlin has admitted in the past, that players in the locker room have admitted in the past. But he also made it very clear that the Steelers aren't looking to go backwards. And if anything, I took that as the Steelers are going to give it a shot. And if this thing works out, awesome. But they're not going to just get rid of George just to get rid of George. That's not something that you're looking for. I took it very clearly as Art Rooney saying exactly what we all thought. George Pickens has his issues. George Pickens has more concerns than literally any other player on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, and it's pretty far between George and number 2. But George Pickens also might be the best player on the field if he reaches his full potential. And because of that, you're going to see what happens. Because, yeah, the Steelers have a history of wide receivers causing issues. They also do a pretty good job keeping those issues under wraps. And they've also found a lot of success in those wide receivers who have had those issues. They're not going to give up on George. I honestly took it the other way around. I took it as maybe this is a sign of the Steelers don't plan to get rid of George right now unless that trade value is too high to pass up. You agree? Disagree?
I would imagine they're going to make calls to see what people are willing to give up George Pickens. But at the same, I mean, that happens every year with almost every player. Like outside of a handful of players, like no, the Chiefs never do that with Patrick Mahomes. They never do that with Travis Kelce. But most teams are going to say, all right, well, let's see what the board looks like right now. And I'm sure that happens in every market. That happens with a lot of star players. But what I took from Rooney's comments there were exactly what I think we've all expected. The Steelers aren't going to go above and beyond to sign George Pickens this offseason because they want to see him kind of mature a little bit more. That's what they've always talked about is, hey, this guy on the field is as good as it's going to get. Like if he can put the pieces together, we saw this year, it was late into the season. He was a top 5 wide receiver before he got injured. If you can continuously do that and kind of taper off on the other stuff, then he's going to become one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. But it still seems like from an organizational standpoint, especially when Art is the one saying it, that they really want to see him start to eliminate the other stuff before they're willing to commit 31 million dollars to this guy over another 4 years. They want to make sure that, hey, even though it's probably not going to go away completely after we pay you over $100+ million or promise you over $100+ million, we want to know that you can keep it in check whenever we ask you to keep it in check. And I don't know if they've seen it over the first 3 years. And I think that's what it sounded like to me when Rooney was speaking is, hey, listen, everybody's going to have their thing, but we need to know and we need to be assured that when push comes to shove and it's time to shine and it's time to perform, you're going to leave that crap off the field and away from the locker room. And I think that's what they're looking for this offseason. I'm not sure they're going to get that assurance in the offseason, but I think that that's what they're going to look for next year if he does return. And I do think that there is more of a chance that he returns than I did after hearing all of the comments post this season from Tomlin and from Rooney and from everything we've heard in reports.
Yeah, I agree. And just like you said, they're going to make phone calls, and there is a possibility that that offer is massive and that, I think there's a good possibility that the offer is too big and too high to pass up and the Steelers have to take advantage of it. I also think that the Steelers will look throughout the season. Like, this isn't going to end, This isn't going to be like George is backed up again. He is the top trade piece for the Pittsburgh Steelers from now until week 9 of the regular season. And if the NFL pushes the trade deadline back, it'll be until week 10 of the regular season. Like, that's where we'll sit with George Pickens. And at any moment he could get traded. That's probably how that's going to go down, because the Steelers are going to look at it and say, George, we either have to know by the trade deadline that we are okay with George walking away for nothing, or that George is going to get another contract, or that we're okay franchise tagging him for a season, which is another possibility. But there's so many questions to answer. The one that I don't see is the Steelers just moving on from George. Like, they're not. I mean, I was told we started this conversation. We started this. And in that initial conversation, I made it very clear that the Steelers aren't giving up George for nothing. And Art knows that. I mean, Art's comments pretty much solidified that George is a great talent. You're going to stick with that great talent. You're going to hope that he matures and he stops being an issue and he plays better in big moments. If he could do all that, awesome. Chances are he's not going to do all that. Nobody's banking on that happening. Otherwise, Art Rooney would be like, I have confidence that would go down. No, he kept saying, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. They will see. And if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, no. But they're not holding that expectation. I mean, everybody could think something else. I get it. And again, I don't think it's really the fan base. I think it's more the media who has spun this somehow into George is gone. Definitely it's happening. Like, no, from the jump, it's if the compensation's right. Sure. But right now, Art Rooney and everybody else is fully aware of how good George Pickens could be. And they're not going to just walk away from that situation.